The cold case killer caught by DNA after 35 years. For 35 years, nothing moved, no suspects, no answers. Just a file sitting in silence while a family waited for a call that never came. The person responsible, he didn't run, he didn't hide. He simply went on with his life, like nothing ever happened. And that's what makes this story so unsettling, because the one thing that could expose him was already there from the very beginning. A tiny trace, invisible at the time, useless until it wasn't. Decades later, that single piece of DNA would reopen everything. And when it finally pointed to a name, it wasn't who anyone expected. For years, the case existed in a strange kind of limbo, never truly closed, but no longer alive either. Detectives who had once worked it moved on to other assignments. Some retired. New officers came in, glanced at the file, and saw what looked like a dead end. A crime with no witnesses, no confession, and no suspects strong enough to pursue. But cold cases have a way of lingering. Every few years, someone would take another look. They'd go back through the original reports, retrace timelines, revisit old interviews, and each time, they'd run into the same wall. The evidence was there, but it couldn't speak clearly enough. Back when the crime first happened, forensic science was limited. Investigators collected what they could: fibers, fingerprints, and most importantly, biological material. At the time, they knew it mattered. They just didn't yet have the tools to unlock it. So it was preserved carefully, logged, and stored away. That decision would become the most important part of the entire case. As the years passed, technology began to change everything. DNA analysis, once a slow and unreliable process, became faster, more precise, and far more powerful. Cases that once seemed impossible started reopening across the country. Old evidence was being tested again, and in many cases, it was finally telling the truth. This case was no exception. More than 3 decades after the crime, investigators decided to give it another chance. They pulled the evidence out of storage and sent it for modern testing. This time, the results were different. A DNA profile began to form. It wasn't perfect at first, just fragments, partial sequences. But it was enough to confirm something critical. The person responsible had left a trace behind, and that trace had survived all those years. But there was still a problem. When the profile was run through existing criminal databases, there was no match. That meant one thing: the suspect had never been caught before. No prior convictions, no DNA on record. He had lived completely under the radar. For a moment, it felt like the case might stall again. But this time, investigators had something they didn't have before: a new strategy. Instead of looking for the suspect directly, they started looking for people connected to him. Using advanced genetic genealogy, analysts compared the DNA profile to public ancestry databases. These platforms weren't built for criminal investigations. They were designed for people tracing their family roots. But within those massive data sets were hidden connections that could lead somewhere unexpected. And slowly, that's exactly what happened. The DNA didn't point to a name right away. Instead, it pointed to distant relatives, people who shared small pieces of genetic code with the unknown suspect. From there, investigators began building a family tree. It was a slow, meticulous process. They mapped out generations, tracked relationships, filtered by geography, and narrowed down possibilities based on age and timelines. Every branch they followed brought them closer, not quickly, but steadily. What made it even more intense was the realization that the suspect wasn't some mysterious outsider. He was part of a family, a community, someone connected to real people who had no idea what he might have done. Eventually, after eliminating dozens of possibilities, one individual began to stand out. He fit the timeline, he was in the right place, and most importantly, he had never been on law enforcement's radar. For 35 years, he had lived an ordinary life, which is exactly why no one ever suspected him. By the time investigators narrowed it down to that one individual, the case had already crossed a threshold. From uncertainty to quiet certainty. But in law enforcement, suspicion isn't enough. They needed confirmation. So instead of making an immediate move, they watched, carefully, patiently. The same way the case had unfolded for decades, slow, methodical, deliberate. Surveillance began. Investigators tracked his movements, routines, habits. Not because he was acting suspicious, but because he wasn't. He blended in perfectly, went about his day like anyone else, and that's what made the situation even more chilling. There were no signs, no cracks, no indication that he had ever been connected to something so serious, which meant the only way forward was science. At some point during the surveillance, officers recovered something he had discarded. Something simple, something most people wouldn't think twice about. A cup, a napkin, an object carrying traces of his DNA. It was collected quietly, legally, and sent for testing. And then came the moment that changed everything. When the lab results came back, the comparison was clear. The DNA from the discarded item matched the DNA preserved from the original crime scene. Not partially, not closely, perfectly. After 35 years, the unknown suspect finally had a name. The arrest that followed didn't just close a case. It reopened a conversation, because the man they took into custody didn't match what people expect when they hear the word killer. He wasn't living on the fringes of society. He wasn't hiding in isolation. He had built a life, a routine, possibly relationships, responsibilities, maybe even trust. To the outside world, he was just another person. And that's what unsettled people the most. Neighbors were shocked. People who had crossed paths with him in everyday life struggled to process the reality. There were no warning signs they could point to, no obvious red flags, just a quiet truth that had been buried for decades. For the victim's family, though, the moment meant something entirely different. It wasn't relief in the way people imagine, not instant closure, not a sudden sense of peace. It was something more complex, an answer after years of not knowing, a name after decades of silence. A moment that finally acknowledged what had happened instead of leaving it suspended in time. Because for families of cold cases, the hardest part isn't just the loss, it's the uncertainty, the unanswered questions, the feeling that time has moved on while they're still waiting. And in this case, time didn't erase the truth, it preserved it. That tiny piece of evidence, once considered too insignificant to use, became the key to everything. It waited quietly while technology advanced, while people changed, while years passed without progress. And when the world finally caught up, it spoke. This case is a reminder of something both reassuring and deeply unsettling. Reassuring because it shows that justice doesn't always disappear with time, that even decades later, answers can still be found. But unsettling because it reveals how easily someone can carry a secret like that and never be suspected. For 35 years, he believed the past was behind him, that whatever had happened would stay buried. But the truth is, time doesn't forget. It doesn't lose track. And sometimes it waits until the exact moment when the truth can no longer be ignored. Because no matter how long it takes, if this story made you think about how many cases are still waiting, how many truths are still hidden, then you're already seeing what most people miss. Because stories like this aren't just about the past, they're about what's still out there. So if you want more real cases, deeper breakdowns, and stories that stay with you long after the video ends, make sure you like the video, share it with someone who loves true crime, and subscribe to the channel, because the next story might already be waiting to be uncovered.